Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share cryptids encounter stories. First story. This story was shared by you/Sun Opinions. Be warned, there are bad people who live in the woods. Have you guys ever seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Many of you probably have, but for those who haven't, it's your run-of-the-mill slasher horror flick made in the 1970s, I think. Hold on, let me check. Yeah, that's right, 1974. It's considered one of the best horror films ever made. When I first watched it, it seemed to really hit home for me, much more than it did for my brothers when we were younger. I was 11 at the time, and we had sneaked a copy of it into our house from our friend who lent it to us at the time. Now, I would have to say one of my biggest fears is being kidnapped and being surrounded by inbred, batshit crazy people, so needless to say, when I saw this there were more than a few sleepless nights with my light on. But did you know it was based on a true story? Just the thought that there were real, actual lunatics like that in the world just made my stomach churn. But what are the chances that you would ever find yourself in a situation like that? Let me tell you all, and this post will serve as a warning to anyone who thinks that the United States doesn't still have its fair share of crazies. Listen to me right now. There are people out there who live in the woods. There are many of them, and I would bet that there are some that live in your state, and they are possibly the most dangerous and batshit crazy people you will ever encounter. They are not to be tampered with. If they find you on their turf, and God forbid capture you, then you might as well be better dead. When groups of people begin to isolate themselves for a long time, many of whom participate in interbreeding, they become something much more different than a human. Their primal instincts and violent tendencies become amplified, as well as their intelligence and empathy becoming non-existent. On No Sleep, I would like to tell you about my most terrifying experience and my first and hopefully last encounter with these people. I will not give any real names or locations on where this occurred, as I fear some of you might get the bright idea of trying to find this place for yourself. So it started over the summer. A few of my friends and I decided we wanted to go on a camping trip. Weird, right? For dudes going into the wilderness with no girls and sleeping in tents. Well, we used to do this when we were kids, so it was kind of a nostalgic trip. We hadn't noticed anything when we were teenagers. It would always be an annual night of fun in the outdoors. We would drink, tell stories, laugh, cry, the whole deal. We live relatively close to the woods, so our parents would let us go up, but only once a year. So anyway, back on topic, it had been 5 or 6 years since we last went up there. We all parted our separate ways when we went to college. We would occasionally all go on Facebook to talk about our lives. So we all finished college, got jobs, and I decided to call them up. I managed to get a hold of 2 friends, and they were both up for it. My other friend moved all the way out to Florida, and he was busy with work and shit, so he couldn't come back to our home state. We brought a bunch of gear and supplies, as well as couple of other things like beer and food. We were ready to relive our high school days as best friends. We got onto the trail at about 5 p.m. We hiked on the trail, and I swear it was like we were back in high school. We talked about everything happening in our lives. We were laughing so hard at the college stories we were practically choking. We finally got to our campgrounds at about 8 p.m. We were all set up by 9, and we lit up the fire and cracked open the beer. We told stories for about 3 hours, and we decided to call it a night. Now there are many rumors in my area about these people in our area who have been isolated for some time now. We had never seen any sign of them when we were younger, so we had no reason to ever be worried about them. I don't know if they relocated, or moved, or something, but basically what I'm trying to say is they should have never been there. They should have never known we were there. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked at my phone. It was around 2:30 in the morning and for some reason I couldn't sleep. For about an hour I just laid in the tent just staring at nothing. That's when I heard it. Not it actually, that's when I heard them. It sounded like a pack of wolves or something walking about our camping grounds. I was already losing my shit at this point, but when I really shit myself was when I realized it didn't sound like animal breathing. The way the steps were moving and the breathing patterns were just too human that there was no way they were animals. I stayed absolutely silent. There was no noise for a brief period, and for a moment I thought I was just imagining it. Then I heard whispering. All I could make out was, after we get them fuckers, who's gonna get their livers? At this point, my fight or flight instincts kicked in. It was officially go time. I decided that there were too many of them. I swear to God, now that I'm remembering it, there must have been a dozen of them at least. I nudged my buddy to wake up. He just turned around and looked at me with eyes that told me, what the actual fuck? I put my finger over my mouth and motioned with my hand that we needed to go. He nudged the other friend and we could clearly hear them talking now. We all stayed absolutely still for 30 seconds, and I took out my Swiss Army knife. I took out my phone for my flash, and I was ready to bolt out there. Then I heard one of them scream, "Them, they are awake." I immediately jumped out of my tent and I got one good look at all of them with my flash. They were fucking disgusting creatures. Their teeth were all deformed and their heads were gigantic. Their ears were huge and perked up like dogs. They were all much bigger than us. I would assume they were all around 6 tall. We left everything. We completely bolted out of the area as fast as we could. I could hear them all chasing after us for a couple of minutes. My adrenaline was at maximum levels and I wanted nothing more than to get the fuck out of the woods. I could hear them cackling as they were trying to track us down. After 2 full hours of running downhill, we finally jumped in the car and called the police. We told them everything that happened. Here's what the cop said in response: "You must have had an encounter with the nickname for group of people. They happen frequently in this area. Just don't go back there." What the fuck? I explained to him that they were about to skin us alive and we left all our shit there. All he could say was, "I'm sorry for your loss, sir, but I would advise you to not go back." I was in complete shock. I have done a lot of research on the group of people the officer told us about after that incident. Some of the stories are horrifying. Many cases of missing men, women, and children, all leading back to this one group of people. The police refuse to infringe this group of people in fear of retaliation. There needs to be stop to this. A lot of nights I keep lying awake in bed thinking about what would have happened had I fallen asleep. I still think about it to this day. It has become very difficult for me to fall asleep after that, knowing that sleep could have let my guard down and gotten me killed. I don't know if you guys have any experiences like this. Feel free to discuss it in the comments. I just needed to get this off my chest. I haven't been the same since then, and I feel like this might add some closure. Have a nice day, everyone. Second story. This story was shared by you/Chad0715. My friend's super creepy camping story. Hey, long time lurker, first time poster on this thread. I had posted this before on another thread, but I figure this is the best place and wanted to see what you guys thought. So tonight me and a long-time friend of mine went to a diner, as we pretty much do every week. We ate burgers, talked about the upcoming UFC fight, got some beers and then finally sat down on my porch and then talked about random things. My buddy is big into camping and hunting trips and always tells me stories about what he's seen in nice places I should visit for myself. But tonight was different. For whatever reason we began to talk about all those shitty monster hunter shows we all see on TV where they never find anything, and he then asked me if I believed in Sasquatch. I'm a pretty open-minded guy and can say personally I do not, but I would still be open to the idea. I mean, we find new species every day. So he began telling me about this hunting trip he went on with two of his friends in the far north of the US a few years ago, and they saw something that really freaked them out. Keep in mind that my friend is one of the most level-headed people I know, even in the craziest of situations. He told me that during their trek they saw a blood trail, so they thought maybe it was a wounded animal. So they followed it a couple of feet into a clearing, and there they saw it, a fully male moose torn open, gutted and mounted on a downed tree with its feet dangling about 4 feet from the ground. Now I don't know how many of you know much about moose, but these things when fully grown weigh about 2,000 pounds, and stand about 5 feet high at the shoulder, so whatever put it up there had to have been pretty big. At first I thought what he thought, logic would point at a bear, but then he got more into detail, which I wish he hasn't. They began to look at the moose more and look around the surrounding area and noticed the guts were taken out and thrown a few feet away. There went the theory of the bear, because a bear would eat the whole animal, it wouldn't just gut the thing and scoop out the guts and toss them. He thereafter explained that there was blood in multiple locations, which made it seem as if whatever killed it would rip off a chunk, move away, eat it and then go back for more, which again doesn't sound like a bear. At which point one of his buddies said, maybe there are more than one, which really freaked him out. So not only was this large animal hanging from a tree gutted, but the organs under the rib cage were gone with the rib cage still intact, which means whatever killed it had to also go under the rib cage to get to them to consume them. At this point I am even getting freaked out. So then a few things didn't add up. How did it manage to stay up there? You would figure gravity would do its job. Nope. The worst part is that this thing's arms and back were broken in such a way that it would stay up and not slip off, and it was their wide open spread eagle. He ended it with telling me it had a bite on its neck, which probably is what did the poor guy in. God, I hope so. So we sat there and went back and forth trying to think how it got there, and a lot of things pointed to different animals since there were no bullet holes in it and it was torn, not cut open. But the question remains, how the hell did a 2000 lb moose wind up 6 feet high in the air? Look, I'm not the toughest guy in the world, but I have seen some shit, but had I seen that I think I would have gone screaming out of the woods. Even my friend who spent the whole week prior just sitting outside by campfire spent the night inside the cabin because he did not want to be in the woods with whatever did that. The only way he could explain it was, I didn't feel threatened, but I felt like I should not be there and had to leave immediately. So we are stumped and we just want to see what you guys think could have done that to that moose. And before you say prank, believe me, it's what I want to believe. It was in a very remote part of the woods where not many people go. So what do you think it was? I am going to try and head off to bed and not have nightmares for the rest of my life. I hate him for telling me this at 2 a.m. in the morning. Third story. This story was shared by you/Spazis_here. I survived a Wendigo. This is not the first story. The first one will be posted after this. My apologies. I've been hidden for a while now. You know that feeling of your home being the safest place on earth, as if it was an impenetrable fortress? It's a foreign feeling. Well, as it turns out, it only resides when you feel as if there is a trust between you and nature. And when you have broken that wall with an entity, you've lost the feeling. The happiest feeling of them all, safety. My home was a sanctuary at one point. You could confide in it for days, if you wished. The feeling of comfort would draw people in like a compass towards the north. But it's gone now. It's foreign, as I said. You take it for granted, and when it's gone it's utterly crippling. You have to hide, you have to run, just to try to find solace in a place that has none. It's in my house. The feeling is gone and it's in my house. I've been hiding in my cleaning closet for around 2 hours, pretty sure, and I do not know how long else this will last, as the thing, the Wendigo, is out for my blood, in my own house. I'll elaborate, but I don't have much time. Last week it started with the taunting. The hellos and the jacks still bumbling around in my mind as I type. The beast taunted me. Its bravado-packed lungs wanted to tease me and get me to move from sanctuary to catch a kill, and that does not make me scared, it just pisses me off. It started with the taunting while I was camping, and when I got fed up, I yelled back at it, and many reverb voices came and yelled right back at me, including my dead elderly neighbor, its early prey. Then it followed me. I screamed at it, I shot at it, and I ran home, as it was the safest place for me. And I wasted all the ammo on the damn kill. I sat there, for whatever feels like forever ago now, in front of my door, blocking it. But the creature is smart, found a way onto my leveraged patio, and glazed in my window. Then came the tapping. The slow, consistent tink-tink-tink on the glass. It was soft, and the monster crouched down to not peer in the window, but the tapping, it was worse. It grew, slowly rising from the soft tink-tink-tink to thuds against the glass, slowly cracking the canvas from the middle out, until I heard it. Hello. The glass crumbled. It crawled in within the next second, the shards distinctly crunching under the weight of the thing. By this point I had my back turned, behind a door, so I had no visuals. The only thing guiding me to that thing was the soft smushing of the carpet under its feet, leading directly to the closet I was in. I leaned against the thin door as if it were a shield against a cascade of arrows, clinging my last hope tightly. It made it to the door. I heard it take a deep long breath in. Then out. It leaned in close, and sniffed. Repeat a couple more times, and he was on his way. He went over to my room door, which was across the hall. I heard the inhale, a stuttering one this time, since he was sniffing. He took a pause. It felt like he debated for a moment. I opened the closet door a tiny crack to instigate what he had stopped for. He had his head tilted. Then took a step back, and rammed the door with his antlers. I jumped at the noise alone, as he hit the door fairly hard. I looked back to see him rearing himself up to go at it again, and I focused on his antlers. They still looked splintered, as if he took on a tornado and landed headfirst onto his antlers from 100 feet up in the air. It looked as if when he took another ramming to the door, the antlers would crumble on impact, and so when he bowed his head, and took a lunge forward, and broke through the door, I was surprised. The door had a hole in it now, he had wriggled out of it a second earlier. The door had a hole, and to accompany it, the door bent inwards towards the hall, near the left upper corner, so much that the pole bit holding the hinge parts together, and broke it to the extent that there was an inch of room between the two halves. He wrung 3 of his fingers into the gap of the door hinge, and another 4 into the hole. He bent forward, and pulled swift and fast, tearing the door from its hinges and breaking the overlapping frame with it. Preceding this, the beast stuck his head in, towards an angle so his antlers did not get caught in the hole where the door used to be. I was scared he found a scent trail of my stuff, since he could then find me based off my scent. He went inside the room, and around 30 seconds of him sniffing around, he started rummaging. I thought I heard a low, raspy, "See you here. You are here." As if he was talking to himself, muttering. I slowly shut the crack of the door I was behind, and as soon as I had fully done so, I heard it. There were 2 thuds, then a smash and crumble of the glass. I looked out of the reimbursed crack I made. He escaped. He smashed my window and escaped. Not only was I scared, now I was scared and pissed off, because now I have this damn thing taunting me like I'm its prey. In which I will not be. I'm going to leave this segment off here. I need to pack. I need to prepare for the inevitable, and I'm going to kill that damned beast. 4th story. This story was shared by you/Rickndickendacken123. Why I'm never going camping again. Michael, James and I had been friends since elementary school. We'd always find time to hang out, despite the increasingly busy schedule and discovery of the opposite sex. We had been particularly busy with work lately and hung out less and less often, so Michael suggested we go camping for the weekend. James and I agreed without even giving it a second thought. We loved camping and this was a good opportunity to get drunk together again without interruptions. I picked them up on Friday afternoon, and when I asked Michael where we are going to camp, he said that it was the same place his granddad used to camp in and that it was highly secluded, meaning no one would be bothering us. Took us a few hours to get there, but when we did, we took our stuff and followed Michael deeper into the woods. We walked for about an hour and it had started to get dark. James and I were a little agitated having to walk for so long to Michael's special spot, but just as we were about to tell him that this was as good a spot as any, he told us we're here. It was a big clearing, giving us a lot of visibility and room to set up our tents. After unpacking, we cooked some food and drank beer, reminiscing of the old days and exchanging news. James talked about how he wanted to become a police officer and we ridiculed him a little bit for kicks, but after we've had our laughs telling him he'll need to arrest himself first for everything he's done in the past, we expressed our support for him. Michael shrugged, not knowing what he wanted in life. Right now he was happy with a 9-to-5 job and just didn't care about anything more than stability. They were about to ask me about my plans when we heard a high-pitched scream echo in the distance. We instinctively turned our heads in the direction of the sound, but saw nothing. I asked Michael, who was a more experienced camper, what that was, but he said he didn't know. We brainstormed what kind of animal it could be, but after a while let it go. We continued talking for a while around the campfire, getting ready to call it a day. Just then, I saw movement in the trees with my peripheral vision. I thought it must have been my imagination, because when I turned my head there I saw only rows of trees. I shrugged it off and continued to listen to James' story. Both he and Michael seemed to not notice anything. A few minutes went by and I had a nagging feeling, something I just couldn't shake away. I looked at the row of trees to my right again and still, there was nothing. Still, looking there made me feel uneasy. I decided to ignore my gut, dismissing it as my own paranoia. Not 5 minutes go by and the feeling of dread only intensified. I looked to my right again and stopped in bafflement. A few feet in front of the row of trees stood a lone, very thin tree, separated from the rest in the clearing. I squinted my eyes, trying to figure if my brain was playing tricks on me from excessive beer consumption. Was that tree there all along? Wait. Holy shit. That's not a tree. It just moved slightly. I blinked and continued staring, transfixed at whatever stood there. The longer I stared, the more apparent it became that it was no tree I was looking at. It was someone, or rather something. Something too thin to be human and too tall to be an animal. I grabbed Michael's attention, and when he looked at the figure, he went pale instantly. He silently muttered, "Oh shit," to himself. "Don't look at it," he said. "Guys, listen to me. Do not look at it. If it comes near us, don't acknowledge it, don't talk to it, just keep your eyes on each other. Got it?" To say I was scared shitless is an understatement. "Michael, what the hell is that?" I asked. "Quiet. Just look at me and don't move your eyes away, alright?" he said with a trembling voice. I looked over to James, who was silently staring at the campfire. Everything was quiet. In fact, it was too quiet, and I only realized it just now. No sounds came at all, save for the crackling of the fire. We stared like that in silence for what felt like ages, when suddenly another sound appeared in the distance. A branch cracked, as if someone had stepped on it. From there we heard the thuds of very slow footsteps, followed by the rustling of leaves on the ground, coming from my right side. In seconds, I saw something emerge in the corner of my eye, but I couldn't make out what it was. Michael motioned with his index finger for us to look at him, and so we did. The figure slowly stepped behind Michael, and I could see with my limited line of sight that the creature was extremely thin, not even fit for the word emaciated. It looked like a real-life stick figure. It was tall, easily towering over Michael, and probably even more than I anticipated, but I wouldn't dare look up. It looked like its body had been made from roots and branches. Slowly, the creature bent down with a creaking noise and put its head next to Michael's. I felt its penetrating gaze on me, but I stared right into Michael's eyes, who was tearing up by this point. I could see the creature smiling with my peripheral vision, and it was almost irresistible to glance at the creature just for a second, but I managed not to do it. The figure stood up, creaking equally, and stayed behind Michael for a few seconds, completely still, before it turned around and went the other way around. It was coming in my direction, and I felt like I was about to piss my pants. It came behind me, and I heard its footsteps stop. Then, the creaking sound followed, and I knew it was bending down. I closed my eyes and breathed out quietly, trembling like a leaf on wind. And then all of a sudden, I heard a frantic set of footsteps to my left. I opened my eyes and glanced to the left, seeing James running away. There was a high-pitched scream behind me, and then the creature ran after James, its footsteps impossibly quick. On me. Michael reminded me during the commotion. I looked back at him and listened as the creature caught up to James, who managed to let out a short scream before he was silenced. What ensued was the sound of loud screeching, bashing, slamming and mauling to my left, while Michael and I stared at each other. It lasted for a whole minute before it abated and the blood-curdling screaming stopped completely. Silence once again filled the air around us, and I heard the slow and soft footsteps to my left. They gradually faded and then completely disappeared. Michael and I continued glaring at each other, too paralyzed with fear to avert our gaze. Only when we started to hear the wildlife in the forest again, Michael suggested we get the fuck out of there. He told me not to look to my left, not because I might see James' body, but because he didn't want to risk the creature still being around. We left all our shit in the camp and bolted out of there. The creature left in the opposite direction, so we hoped we wouldn't run into it, but we didn't care about ignoring it at this point. We heard a loud shriek in the distance, which indicated the monster was far away from us, which put us at least momentarily. Still though, That scream was enough to freeze the marrow of the bone. We reached the car much faster than we got to the campsite, and once we got in, I clumsily pulled out my keys, almost dropping them on the floor while trying to put them in the ignition. We drove out of there with a cloud of dust behind us, both of us shaking. "Michael, what the fuck was that thing?" I asked while going as fast as the road allowed me to. I don't know," he muttered, still pale. "My grandfather told me about it a few times, but I thought those were just stories. He said that the creature can only hurt you if you let it know you see it." "Poor James," I said, glancing in the rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting that thing to appear in the reflection. Luckily, it never did, and Michael and I made it out safely. We went straight to the police and reported the whole thing, to their skepticism. I can't blame them. A couple of drunk guys barge in the middle of the night, telling them about a fucking stick figure that killed their friend in the woods. After some convincing, they decided to send a patrol to the spot. An investigation was started when the police quickly found James' body. They said he had been mauled so badly that they couldn't identify him. They concluded it was a bear attack, dismissing our story of the stick figure, threatening that we weren't suspects right now, but that it could change very quickly, so Michael and I dropped it. Fifth story. This story was shared by you/Nymphrider. I heard my grandma's voice, but it wasn't her. It was summer night. I was sleeping at my grandparents' house upstairs with my cousin that night. I woke up at 2:30 a.m., all sweaty because in our room it was no joke like 200 degrees Celsius. I decided to cool a bit on the balcony. I stood there maybe for like 2 minutes, just checking my phone, and that's when I heard it. My grandma, calling my name. Wait, my grandma. Out in the garden, at nearly 3 a.m. Definitely no. I started to shake and got back inside as fast as I could, but before I did, I saw two light dots, eyes staring at me behind one of the trees opposite the balcony, and massive horns nearly reaching the top of the tree. I couldn't sleep after that night, and I never told my cousin just to not scare her. I personally, after this incident, started to look into cryptozoology, and the thing I know for sure I saw that night is Wendigo. The thing is, Wendigo have this ability of changing voices to sound like your friends or family. After that night, I'm never going on balcony at night again. Something about Wendigo. The Wendigo's senses of sight, smell, and hearing are greatly enhanced, comparable to those of many predatory animals. The Wendigo can see clearly in total darkness, and it may have some kind of infrared vision, enabling it to see its prey by detecting its bodily heat emanations. Once the Wendigo has its prey's scent, it is able to follow it swiftly and precisely, no matter how far away the victim may be. Its hearing is so keen that it can hear the pounding of its fear-filled victim's heart, which causes the beast's own heart to pound with joy and anticipation. The Wendigo is able to mimic human voices, which are most often cries for help. The Wendigo is a purely anthropophagous beast, hungering for human flesh. It will go to any lengths to procure this food, no matter the risk or possibility of injury. The Wendigo craves human flesh and is constantly starving for it, indicated by the beast's lean, wiry frame. The Wendigo is known to have its preferences: the sweet fat of children, the soft skin of women, the coarse muscles of men, especially warriors and hunters, or the brittle bones of the elderly. In preparation for long winters, when few travelers are out and about, the Wendigo will stash away large pots filled to the rim with human remains in the highest tree branches. On rare occasions, it will take humans alive and hide them away in its lair, allowing the beast to feed whenever it wants. The Wendigo is more intelligent than many humans, and thus understands the value of storing and saving its food. However, it will only resort to this when food is scarce and it becomes desperate. Since the Wendigo constantly hungers for human flesh, it wreaks destruction in its pursuit of its chosen prey. It crashes through the forests, all the while uprooting trees, causing game animals to stampede, and causing whirlwinds. The monster is often thought to be the cause of ice storms, tornadoes, and violent winds. All of these weather-related phenomena are believed to signal the Wendigo's presence. Sixth story. This story was shared by you/synthetic_tinsel. The Thing in the Woods. I've been dying to tell this story, though I know no one is bound to believe me. I don't even want to tell my parents in fear that they'll stare at me in disbelief, and think that I'm crazy. So, here I am, anonymously telling it to a group of strangers in hopes that someone will believe me, and give me some peace of mind. It started out a few months ago when we moved into our new home. I grew up in a rural community, but there were plenty of neighbors, and mostly fields around, no woods. Given that I am the youngest child, my parent waited until I was done with high school to move, as to not affect my already established life. Although we had always lived in a small, rural community, my parents were ready for something a little more secluded, something with a lot of acreage, woods, and a place to shoot. They put my childhood home up on the market, and soon found their dream home, which is where I am currently, and desperately writing this story. The house and the property are beautiful. It's a large, turn-of-the-century house facing 15 acres of land, the majority of which are woods, and a nice half-acre pond. The best part, or so I thought, is that there are no neighbors within a mile of us. At first I really enjoyed it. Being out in the woods was very much a cathartic experience for me. It helped shed the stresses of school and studying. Being among the tall trees and the surrounding nature made all of my problems seem totally insignificant, so I made a habit of going on regular walks through the woods. As the weeks went on, I started noticing strange things as I went on my walks. I would find partially eaten deer scattered along the leaf-littered ground, accompanied by a putrid, rotting smell, which I attributed to the carcass in front of me. At first, I thought nothing of it. It was probably coyotes, I would tell myself. Other than that, I thought nothing of it, but started carrying a gun with me on my walks in case I encountered the animal that was responsible for the carnage I saw in front of me. As the days went on, I started noticing more and more mutilated deer scattered across the floor of the woods, still accompanied by the rotting smell, which I again attributed to the animals. If the increasing number of mutilations weren't enough, I started to notice a change in the sounds coming out of the woods. What was once a cacophony of sounds was now mostly dead silence, minus the low, guttural growl that seemed to be becoming more prevalent, more pronounced, and more insidious each day. By this point, I had stopped going on my little walks. Gun or no gun, I didn't want to risk the chances of facing whatever was causing these events. That being said, my curiosity eventually got the best of me one night as I heard its growls. I decided that I was going to go get a trail cam, and set it up out in the woods the following day, in hopes of finally seeing what was out there. The next evening, after work, I gathered up what little courage I had left, and, camera in hand, went walking out into the very woods I had promised myself I would stay out of. I never did get to set up the trail cam. I lost it somewhere in the woods while I was in a panic, running for my life. I made it about 100 yards past the tree lines into the woods, where I decided to stop and set up the camera. I thought it was a good place to set it up, and, quite frankly, I was too scared to go any further. After all, I wanted to spend as little time out there as possible given the ongoing events, and the fact that it would be dark soon didn't help. Already on edge, every creak of the wood, and every crunch in the leaves sent me into a panic. Rushing to set the camera up, I drop it, sending it to the leaf-ridden ground with a thud. Murmuring under my breath, cursing myself for being out there, I bent down to pick the camera up, when I started to smell that putrid smell of rotting flesh again. I carefully looked around, checking my surroundings to see if anything was out there. I could feel something watching me, but I couldn't see anything. Just as I was finishing picking my supplies off of the ground, I heard that low, guttural growl again, as well as the snap of a branch to my right. I quickly turned, seeing a human-like creature standing there, staring at me. I was completely frozen with fear. It had human features, standing on two legs, and it had feet and hands. The two things that threw me off, however, was the fact that its skin was charred black, as if it had been burnt in a fire, and, most disturbingly, it had no upper or lower lips. Although mostly bald, a few thin, straggling hairs stuck every which way out of its scalp. Its sharp teeth were hanging out like hypodermic needles. With the absence of lips, its raw, red gums hung out in the open. Thick strings of what appeared to be saliva dripped off of its chin in a persistent stream. For one single, brief moment, the world around me seemed to stop. I quickly went through options on what to do. There were really only two viable options: either stay exactly how I was, and get attacked, and most likely killed by this thing, or I could get the fuck out of there. I chose the latter. I quickly scrambled to my feet, and ran as fast as I could, throwing my camera, in vain, at the creature behind me. In the chaos of what had just occurred, I found myself to be momentarily lost after running in what I thought was the right direction for what felt like 20 minutes, but I'm sure was only 30 seconds. Looking around and not seeing the spawn of hell that I had just encountered, I stopped to collect myself, and try to find the way back to the house. I finally decided on the general direction in which I should head, when I heard a commotion that almost sounded like a horse pounding its hooves on the dirt. I looked behind me and saw that thing, whatever it was, running at me on all fours, mucus-like spit flying out of the corners of its mouth, like a rabid dog. I ran as quickly as I possibly could without daring to look behind me. Although I would not look at it, I could hear it galloping behind me, and smell its rotted flesh. Tears ran down my eyes, as I thought that there was no way possible to make it out of the woods alive, when I finally saw the lights of my house out of the clearing. Using what little adrenaline I had left to sprint the 200 yards or so to my back porch, I quickly opened the door and slammed it shut, not daring to look out the window. It's been about a month now since that happened. I haven't told anyone, and I will not dare to go back out in those woods. I've been doing a lot of research to see if I could find any clues as to what that thing might have been. I've exhausted myself, but I think I may have come to a conclusion. The closest thing I could find was possibly a skinwalker. I know my sighting doesn't entirely match up with the stories I've heard, but it's the closest thing I've found. Any suggestions on what it might be would be greatly appreciated. 7th story. This story was shared by you/unhappy_cicada 2676. Forest encounter left me scared shitless. Okay, this is something I experienced a few years back. During the summer break, my sister and I were visiting our aunt who lived in the country. Her house is located in a fairly wooded area, but there are several neighbors around. There's a man-made lake about a mile away from my aunt's place, and it is pretty much surrounded by woods. Me and my sister loved to walk around near the lake whenever we visited our aunt, ever since we were small kids, so this time too, we decided to go for a walk. It was about 5 p.m. and the sun was shining brightly. We were told not to walk alone near the lake, because there could be wild animals or poachers and whatnot, but we decided that we were old enough to go alone, 15 and 13 years old. So we sneaked out while the adults were chatting in the living room and strolled along the path to the lake. The air is fresh, the sun is bright, and we're feeling like we could take over the world. We were walking along the wooded path to the lake when my phone rang. It was my mom, who was at the aunts. Because we sneaked out without telling them and we were almost at the lake, I didn't answer it and put the phone into silent mode. Stupid, yeah, I know. Then we reach the lake, take our shoes and socks off and dip our feet into the cool water. We talked for some time, regular teen stuff. I was telling a joke to my sister when this horrible feeling washed over me. It was like I was being watched. I instantly whipped my head around because I thought there was a perv or someone stalking us, but there was no one around. My sister too seemed to be spooked by something. She asked me, "Did you feel that?" And I said yes. We sat there for a few minutes, holding each other's hands and hearts in our throats, but nothing happened. The feeling eventually went away, so we brushed it off. After some time, we got bored and decided to search for something to eat. The woods around the lake were practically full of wild berries, so we decided go pick some. I found a nice patch of berries not far from the tree line and we quickly started picking them up and shoved them into our mouths. I had finished half of the berries I had picked when I noticed a really cool bug on a leaf. I wanted to snap a photo of it because I hadn't seen it anywhere else. I searched my pockets for the phone and it wasn't there. My sister asked what was wrong and soon we both started crawling around searching for the phone. It was a fairly new one and quite expensive, so I absolutely did not want to lose it. "Don't freak out, sis," my sister, Em, said. "Let's just give it a ring. If it's nearby, we'd hear it." She took her phone out and called my number. Instantly, my ringing tone starts going off, to the left of us. It was near the path we took into the forest, and was pretty loud. So I take a step to go and retrieve it, but Em grabs me by the wrist and stops me. "You turned the silent mode on, didn't you?" she asks with a shaking voice. That's when it dawns upon me. I was 100% sure I turned it on. If the phone is silent, then what the fuck is making the ringing tone? Then we realized that the entire forest is silent other than my ringing tone. Dead fucking silent. Em's grip on my wrist tightens. We look at each other, with sheer terror in our eyes. Suddenly, the ringing stops. Silence. We waited for another 10 seconds. That's when we heard it. My aunt called out to us from somewhere deep in the woods. "M.T. I'm here." We froze. It sounded like our aunt, but my gut told me that it wasn't. Something was off about it, like the usual emotions were absent. It was almost mechanical. Like someone mimicking something he had heard before. Then the voice called out again. This time, it was definitely wrong. It was closer to an animal trying to speak. I screamed at Em. "Run!" So we ran. Ran like all hell was loose and fucking demons were driving us out of the woods. During the time we ran, I could hear something following us, hot on our heels. Twigs snapping, leaves crunching, and occasional screeching noises. Almost like a wild cat, but far more sinister. It reeked of evil. We ran past the lake as fast as we could and finally reached the paved road where several vehicles were parked. The woods also ended there. We were out of breath and scared to the core. I turned around to look, there was nothing. Several people gave us concerned looks, but no one asked anything. We walked with a group of folks who were heading in the direction we needed to go. We kept looking around, but the usual sounds were there, like birds singing. When we got home, we were immediately grounded. We were not allowed to go for walks for the rest of the time we stayed there, even with an adult. We didn't protest. Sometime later, I described this encounter to my aunt. She looked at me, her face as white as a sheet of paper, but she didn't say anything. I tried to press her for information, but every time she shook her head and refused to talk about it. Later, I heard their town had a lot of disappearances after our experience, especially kids and homeless people. I don't know if these things are related, but something tells me they are. Both my sister and I get shivers when we talk about it, considering how close we were to getting abducted, or even killed. I now know about crawlers/rakes, and I believe that's what we met. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.